This series is...
Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Stuart Smith. Stuart, what are the big stories you're tracking today?
Well, it's 11:30 a.m. in London and 12:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, US lawyers are trying to convince a British court Julian Assange should be extradited to America. The Houthis claim damage to another civilian ship, and Taiwan takes on China's Coast Guard. But first, back to you, Tanvi, for the headlines.
New Delhi hosts India's flagship conference on geopolitics and geoeconomics, the 9th Raisina Dialogue. Prime Minister of Greece to deliver the keynote address as the chief guest. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds bilateral talks with his Greek counterpart in New Delhi. Kyriakos Mitsotakis says Greece can be an important partner in the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. The United States to impose major sanctions on Moscow over Russian opposition leader Navalny's mysterious death. EU also approves 13th sanctions package against Russia. Furthering ties with a valued partner, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi extended warm welcome to visiting dignitary Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, at the Hyderabad House in New Delhi today. The two leaders held delegation-level talks, during which they reviewed bilateral ties and discussed deepening partnership in areas of defence, security, maritime trade and investment, cultural ties, among others. The Indian Prime Minister and his Greek counterpart also decided to conclude at the earliest the new initiatives on migration and mobility agreement, sports, higher education cooperation as well. They stressed that dialogue and diplomacy are significant to resolving conflicts. At the meeting, Prime Minister Modi welcomed Greece's interests in the Indo-Pacific region. He added that Greece can be an important partner in the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC. Following the bilateral level talks, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Greek counterpart gave a joint press statement. Prime Minister Modi said that both sides are working towards strengthening the relations further, especially in the defence sector. He added that both the countries have similar concerns regarding the challenge of terrorism.
भारत में डिफेंस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में को प्रोडक्शन और को डेवलपमेंट के नए अवसर बन रहे हैं जो दोनों देशों के लिए लाभदायक हो सकते हैं। हमने दोनों देशों के रक्षा उद्योगों को आपस में जोड़ने पर सहमति जताई है। आतंकवाद के खिलाफ लड़ाई में भारत और ग्रीस की चिंताएं और प्राथमिकताएं समान है। हमने इस क्षेत्र में अपने सहयोग को और अधिक मजबूत करने पर विस्तारपूर्वक चर्चा की।
Later, both the Prime Ministers talked about solving international disputes through dialogue and diplomacy. Prime Minister Modi welcomed Greece's active participation and positive role in the Indo-Pacific, while his Greek counterpart underlined India's key role in these efforts.
हम सहमत हैं कि सभी विवादों और तनावों का समाधान डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी के माध्यम से ही किया जाना चाहिए। हम इंडो पैसिफिक में ग्रीस की सक्रिय भागीदारी और सकारात्मक भूमिका का स्वागत करते हैं। यह खुशी का विषय है कि ग्रीस ने इंडो पैसिफिक ओशन इनिशिएटिव से जुड़ने का निर्णय लिया है। पूर्वी मेडिटरेनियन क्षेत्र में भी सहयोग के लिए सहमति बनी है।
We know that the world today is facing unprecedented challenges that require immediate and efficient action, from the ongoing war in Ukraine to the situation in the Middle East, from climate change to food, energy security. For all these things, for all these challenges, one thing is certain. In order for governments to tackle them, international partnerships and collective action is paramount. And India has a critical role to play in this endeavor. And we view India as one of the main pillars of stability and security in the broader region of the Indo-Pacific. And given your size and history, your strategic importance, it is a very positive development that India is assuming with vigor this new leadership role.
Kyriakos Mitsotakis, Prime Minister of Greece, also appreciated the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
I have found a visionary, a principled leader, and dare I say, a true friend. And the importance that we attach to our relations with India is evident not only in the increase of our bilateral contacts over the past year, but also in the partnerships we have developed.
The Greek Prime Minister also extended support for India's candidature to the UN Security Council for the period of 2028-29, and he also pitched for UN reforms in the age of changing global order.
Cooperation, I think, shows great promise, not only bilaterally, but also in multilateral arenas, including the UN. Greece will support India's candidacy to the UN Security Council for the period 2028-2029. And of course, we also support and participate in the broader dialogue about reforming the UN itself in order to make it more representative of the shifting patterns of development and global power.
Post his parleys with India's Prime Minister Modi, Greek Prime Minister met with India's Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar. Mitsotakis' visit to India aims to further strengthen the strategic partnership between India and Greece. Earlier, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar called on the visiting dignitary. As India and Greece celebrate 75 years of diplomatic relations, the two leaders noted the significant advances made in political, bilateral trade and investment and education sectors. They also spoke on stronger collaboration via Visegrad and the European Union. The Greek Prime Minister was accorded a ceremonial welcome and guard of honour this morning, for which Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcomed him at India's President House, the Rashtrapati Bhavan. After the ceremonial welcome, the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said the strategic partnership with India holds a significant importance for Greece.
Well, it's a real privilege to be in India on an official state visit, reciprocating the visit of the Prime Minister to Greece a few months ago. For Greece, the strategic partnership between our two countries is of particular importance, and we will have the opportunity to discuss a wide range of topics, political consultations, strategic partnership, but also fostering our economic ties between our two economies. So it's a real privilege to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the discussions we will have with the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister Mitsotakis, along with his wife Mareva Grabowski, also laid a wreath at the Rajghat this morning. Rajghat is the memorial of Mahatma Gandhi. He paid tribute to the father of the nation there, with the belief that Mahatma Gandhi's timeless values of non-violence continue to inspire humanity. Later, India's External Affairs Ministry briefed media on the state visit of Prime Minister of Greece to India. Addressing media, Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra said Migration and Mobility Partnership Agreement is in the advanced stage of agreement and can be finalized in the months ahead.
an important element of people-to-people ties that was emphasized by both the leaders in terms of our efforts to structure that cooperation is migration and mobility partnership agreement, an area where there is complementarity of interest. It's in advanced stages of consideration, and we expect that this agreement could be finalized in months ahead.
Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra added that discussions took place in the larger context of stronger connectivity between India and Greece and looked at all options that would strengthen connectivity.
Both leaders reinforced their commitment to build, in this regard, the partnership in the Mediterranean Sea as also in the Indo-Pacific. As I mentioned, they also exchanged views on how to build our cooperation in the context of India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. Prime Minister Mitsotakis also conveyed the decision by Greece to join the Indo-Pacific Ocean initiatives led by India.
So staying in New Delhi, India's flagship conference on geopolitics and geostrategy begins in the national capital in an hour's time from now. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will inaugurate the three-day Raisina dialogue. Prime Minister of Greece will deliver the keynote address. A report.
Arrivals have started in New Delhi for India's premier conference on geopolitics and geoeconomics, the Raisina Dialogue 2024. The Raisina Dialogue is being held in New Delhi from 21st to 23rd February and will address challenging issues facing the global community. With the theme Chaturanga, Conflict, Contest, Cooperate, Create, the conference will delve into issues under diverse sub-thematic pillars like war and peace, tech regulations, invest, innovate, and more.
I'm here to speak about our calling for this century.
And this year, under India's leadership of the G20, we're putting sustainable development at the center of the agenda.
We have moved to a new mindset where solutions to climate challenge become the drivers of a new economic age.
India has emerged as a powerful leader and policy maker.
At the invitation of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, is also paying a state visit to India from 21st to 22nd February 2024 and will be the chief guest and keynote speaker at the 9th Raisina Dialogue. Every year, leaders in politics, business, media and civil society converge in New Delhi to discuss the state of the world and explore opportunities for cooperation on a wide range of contemporary matters.
When a few nations set the agenda and expected others to fall in line are over.
Hamas and the people who support Hamas are fully responsible for this appalling act of terror.
The health crisis during the pandemic, who could it solve? And more importantly, who would answer?
The dialogue is structured as a multi-stakeholder, cross-sectoral discussion involving heads of state, cabinet ministers and local government officials who are joined by thought leaders from private sector, media and academia. The conference is hosted by the Observer Research Foundation in partnership with the Indian Ministry of External Affairs. Meghna Dev reports for DG India.
On to Europe now. The European Union has called for an independent and transparent international investigation into circumstances that led to the death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Russia's representative was summoned to Brussels, where he was urged to release Navalny's body to his family without further delay. The Kremlin says Western allegations that Putin was responsible for Navalny's death are unacceptable. The European Union also approved the 13th sanctions package against Moscow over its conflict with Ukraine. So come February 24th, it will be 2 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, with the anniversary coming just days after the sudden death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. European leaders are being asked hard questions about what more they can do to thwart Russian aggression and support Ukraine. For more on this, we are now joined by DW's Arthur Sullivan in Berlin. Arthur, welcome to DD India Global. So, how have European leaders reacted to the death of Alexei Navalny?
Yes, Alexei Navalny's death came as a huge shock to European leaders, even though it wasn't entirely surprising given how things have gone for various opponents of the Russian President Vladimir Putin over the years, and indeed how Navalny himself had been treated over the last period since he came back to Russia in 2021, having been poisoned before that. Now, the European leaders reacted with very clear words of condemnation for Russia. They made it very clear that they believed Vladimir Putin and the Russian state were directly responsible for Navalny's death, and they emphasized that it showed just how undemocratic and brutal the repression of the Russian state has become under Putin, and indeed since the invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago this week, as you said. The German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, he said Navalny had paid for his courage with his life. The French President Emmanuel Macron said that the death showed that in Russia, free spirits were sent to the Gulag and condemned to death. Now, since then, the story has moved on, of course. Navalny's body has still not been released to his family. They say that this is because Russia is trying to delay things in order to cover up the true cause of Navalny's death. And Navalny's widow, Yulia Navalnaya, she met with European foreign ministers earlier this week, and she made it very clear she holds Putin responsible for her husband's death, and she urged the EU to take action.
Okay, and Arthur, what about the broader question of European financial support for Ukraine and indeed investment in its own security for the years ahead?
Well, a few weeks back, the EU agreed a 50 billion euros financial support package for Ukraine. And even though there is growing opposition from certain countries in Europe which are more closely aligned or certainly more sympathetic to Moscow's perspective, such as Hungary, the EU clearly is financially still committed to supporting Ukraine. Now, in terms of its own security, that's a different question, and that's certainly not going to go away anytime soon. So there were some recent comments, I'm sure you're aware of, from Donald Trump, where he said he would encourage Russia to attack a NATO country if it did not meet its spending commitments on security. That was greeted with horror by European leaders and in various capitals of Europe, particularly given Trump's chances of winning the US presidential election later this year. So these fears that America could pull back from its long-established, deep role in terms of overseeing security in Europe under a second Trump presidency, those fears are growing with good reason. So Europe has ramped up its arms production in the last few years. In fact, over the last decade it's gone up, and particularly in the last 2 years since the invasion. But military and security experts say it's still nowhere near enough to make the continent able to defend itself. And just a final point on this question. European countries which are members of NATO are spending more and more on their security. So 10 years ago in 2014, just 3 NATO members met the agreed target of spending 2% of their GDP on defence. This year, 18 countries are going to hit it, so things have got better. But here's the thing. For a long time, this question was simply non-existent. It was dormant. It wasn't asked anymore. And that is no longer the case. In fact, it's probably at a more critical point and a more pertinent question than at any stage since the Cold War. And given what we saw last week in Russia, given what's happening every day in Ukraine, this question is only going to get bigger.
Indeed. Thank you, Arthur. Arthur Sullivan joining us from Deutsche Welle, our partner station in Berlin. Meanwhile, the United States has also said that it will announce a major package of sanctions against Russia on Friday in the backdrop of Navalny's death. The latest sanctions will target Russian defense and industrial bases, along with the sources of revenue for the economy. White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby informed that the package will hold Russia accountable for what happened to Navalny, quote unquote, and for its actions over the course of the conflict in Ukraine. Further, a war of words broke out between current US President and the hopeful Donald Trump over circumstances that transpired following Navalny's death. President hopeful Trump said Navalny was a very brave man who probably should not have returned to Russia. While President Joe Biden thrashed his Republican rival's response, asking, why does Trump always blame America? After he compared his alleged political troubles with Navalny's mysterious death and said that this incident made him more aware of what is happening in the United States. After Navalny's death on Friday, Biden directly blamed Russian leader Vladimir Putin as did Trump's main rival for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, Nikki Haley. On to London now. 2 judges at the UK High Court will conclude their 2-day hearing today on Julian Assange's final appeal against being sent to the United States. My colleague Stuart Smith is in London. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Stuart, a crucial verdict awaits Assange and his family.
Indeed, the High Court in London is likely to deliver a verdict on Julian Assange's extradition today after his lawyers launched their final appeal against plans for the WikiLeaks founder to be extradited to the US. Assange, if extradited, will face espionage charges related to government secrets he spilled on his website. He's been in prison in London for almost 5 years. He used WikiLeaks to publish confidential material, arguing the public had a legitimate right and need to possess the information.
That this farce be brought to an end and that the courts allow Julian to be free. He's a political prisoner and he needs his freedom. He has been in prison for 5 years.
The United States wielded its veto power once more at the Security Council on Tuesday, blocking a ceasefire resolution, asserting that the proposed resolution from Algeria could jeopardize delicate negotiations in Cairo, working towards a sustainable peace. This move has garnered criticism from council members, while Algeria has reaffirmed its commitment to advocating for an immediate ceasefire. The United States and Russia are set to speak at ongoing proceedings in the International Court of Justice, reviewing Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. The UN's highest court was asked to give a non-binding judgment on the legal consequences of occupied Palestinian territories, though Israel has warned that the legal hearing might cause a hindrance in reaching a negotiation. The ICJ is hearing arguments from 52 countries and 3 international organisations, the largest number of parties to participate in any single World Court case. Yemen's Houthi group said on Tuesday that they had launched a missile attack against an Israeli ship in the Gulf of Aden. The Houthi military spokesperson said they targeted a ship called MSC Silver, and his group also used drones to target a number of US warships in the Red Sea and Arabian Sea. Meanwhile, US and British forces responded with airstrikes, mobile missile launchers and underwater drones, but failed to deter the group from launching more attacks. French warships in the Red Sea intercepted and destroyed drone attacks originating from Yemen in the patrol zones in the Gulf of Aden and the southern Red Sea. Hundreds of protesting Spanish farmers were seen driving their tractors towards Madrid's city centre on Wednesday. The protesters are expected to block Madrid's main entrances to demand for protection and better prices for their products. Agricultural workers across Europe, including Poland, France, Germany, Spain and Italy, have taken to the streets this year to fight low prices and high costs, cheap imports and EU climate change constraints. China-Taiwan relations are under strain after Taiwan Coast Guards on Tuesday drove away a Chinese Coast Guard boat that entered waters near its sensitive frontline islands. However, the Taiwanese Defense Ministry informed the public that they are not stepping up the military on Kinmen Islands following the incident.
Tensions between China and Taiwan have been intensifying with each passing day. In the recent clash between the two countries, Taiwan drove away a Chinese Coast Guard boat that entered waters near the sensitive Kinmen Islands. Taiwan's Coast Guard said in a statement that it dispatched a boat and used radio and broadcast to drive away the Chinese boat, which left the area an hour later. Meanwhile, Taiwan has not increased military deployments on the frontline islands facing China, and there is nothing unusual in the military situation around Taiwan. Ireland's Defence Minister briefed the Legislative Yuan about the incident, where he termed the entire matter as a judicial case.
This incident is currently being handled by the Coast Guard from the perspective of a judicial case. The Ministry of Defense will not directly intervene to avoid escalating any local tensions.
Chinese interference in Taiwanese waters comes just days after China's Coast Guard boarded a Taiwanese tourist boat near Taiwan-controlled islands next to China's coast. Head of the Taiwan's Ocean Affairs Council had earlier said that such actions of China have harmed the Taiwanese people's feelings and triggered panic. Taiwan, which China claims as its own territory despite the island's rejection, has been wary of efforts by Beijing to ramp up pressure on Taipei following the elections last month of Lai Ching-te as president, a man Beijing views as a dangerous separatist.
Well, that's it from me here in London. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Stuart Smith joining us all from London. And now, as we wind up this edition of DD India Global, a sad story coming our way. India's legendary radio personality, Amin Sayani, passed away on Tuesday at the age of 91. The iconic radio presenter hosted the popular show Binaka Geetmala, which was broadcast since 1952, mainly over Radio Ceylon, and after that over Vividh Bharati for 42 long years. India's President Draupadi Murmu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed condolences to his family, admirers and all radio lovers. For some of us, the name Amin Sayani was synonymous with radio. That's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter and Instagram. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.